All right, welcome to the Möbius Enterprise Excellence Model webinar. My colleagues will in a bit explain to you how they came to the model and what it entails. Normally you should be able to see my screen and see my colleagues as well. If you have questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. And if there are problems, don't hesitate to ask, and then we'll see how we can help you. Enjoy the webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will start with a small introduction from our side. To start with myself, I'm Frederik Loze. I have started my career in automotive. I have been working for Volvo Trucks for 6 years as a lean coach in production and logistics. And for the last 4 years, I have been working at Möbius as a senior operational excellence lead, doing mostly projects around operational excellence in industries, but also some projects in services environment and in society environment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine. I'm also specialized in operational excellence, mainly in industrial environments. I've started my career at Möbius and I'm working there now for more than 8 years. And during that time, I executed multiple operational excellence transformations in various companies.
And then my name is Gert. I have about 8 years of working experience within operational excellence consulting, mainly working for services clients, assisting them to achieve operational excellence in all levels of the organization, going from the redefining the strategy and the service model to working at the offices, creating a culture of continuous improvement.
So maybe starting with a small summary of Möbius. I think most of you know Möbius, but we're a small to medium-sized consultancy firm with around 100 consultants. We are founded 24 years ago as a spin-off of the University of Ghent. We have our headquarters in Ghent, so we are active in Belgium, but we are also active in France and the Netherlands. We mainly work in 4 sectors, namely the industry sector, public sector, services and retail, and healthcare. And we have expertise in supply chain management, customer excellence, sustainability, digital transformation, and of course, operational excellence. Jumping to the agenda of today. First point, we will go through what is operational excellence exactly, and how was the Möbius Enterprise Excellence model developed. Maybe to shortly explain, in the model we talk about enterprise excellence. So what is the difference with operational excellence? Actually, not a huge difference, but we at Möbius like to use the term enterprise excellence because we want to focus on more than only operations. We want to focus on the complete value chain of the organization. So that's why we sometimes use the term enterprise excellence. In a second block of the webinar, we will explain the different building blocks of the enterprise excellence model more in detail. So we will also show some practical examples at customers. And the last point of the webinar will be a Q&A where you can ask questions and maybe already give some feedback on the model based on your experiences as well.
Okay, so what is operational excellence and how did we develop our Möbius Enterprise Excellence model? Let me start with a definition. So operational excellence is a management strategy that strives to achieve consistent and reliable results. And how does operational excellence do this? Well, by focusing on the customer. Operational excellence tries to meet and exceed customer expectations, and this by constantly improving, so by focusing on continuous improvement. Unfortunately, time shows that most companies are unable to sustain those performance improvements. So they, instead of continuously increasing, as you can see on the graph, those companies, they stagnate or they even have decreasing performance over time. There are, however, companies that do succeed in making continuous improvements sustainable. And the question, of course, is what do these companies do differently? The answer to that question is culture. Culture is the key to sustainable success. So we see that companies that are unable to sustain performance improvements probably didn't work hard enough on their culture. They might have implemented some tools that allowed them short-term gains, but they were unable to make this sustainable in the long term because they did not work on culture. So what is culture, you might ask? Culture is the sum of all observable, repeatable behaviors in an organization. So it is the way that things are done in an organization. Fine, but then how do you change culture? Well, culture is actually a result of the systems that you have in your organization. So the systems of your organization drive behavior. Let me give you an example. Say you want the behavior, all employees make improvement suggestions. That is a behavior. Well, if you want that behavior, you need to set up a whole system. It's not enough to just implement a tool like a suggestion box, for example. You really need to think about the process. How will we treat those suggestions or ideas? How will we follow them up? And you even maybe want to monitor the suggestions. So you want to keep track of how many improvement ideas do I get per employee, per month, per year. And if you even go a step further, you can put a target on that and integrate it in your evaluation system so that each employee has a target of the amount of improvement ideas they need to do every year. So you see, this is just for creating one observable, repeatable behavior. You therefore need already a whole system. It's not enough to just implement one tool. So if you realize that as an organization, you consist of systems, and that systems holds the key to shaping your culture, then you already know a lot. But the question, of course, is if you want to become an excellent organization, or if you want to become enterprise excellence, what systems do you then need to set up or change? And that is where our model comes in. So why the Möbius Enterprise Excellence Model? Well, after executing several projects over the years at different customers, we really felt the need to capture all those learnings and those key elements of enterprise excellence into one model. And why one model? Well, we see that many companies are actually struggling with seeing the bigger picture. They do some improvement initiatives, but the real culture change fails to appear because there's a lack of consistency. So that's why one model, to have one big picture. A second reason is that we can also structure the different focus areas of enterprise excellence. So you have all these different puzzle pieces, and our model shows how those pieces all fit together. And then a last reason is that based on the model, we can do an objective assessment and determine the next steps that a company needs to take in their journey towards excellence, and also set up a long-term plan to achieve enterprise excellence that is sustainable.
Thank you, Jasmine. And then I will quickly take over to very shortly introduce you then how did we create this model. It was basically based on three things. The first thing that we looked at is the research that exists, of course, the literature that's there. And when we talk about culture, then we usually refer to the Shingo framework that some of you who are in the call might know about. The Shingo framework generally focus on the what are the different guiding principles and so on, but a little less on the how. And that's also what we want to do now with our enterprise excellence model, is create the translation of this into the exact systems and tools that you could use to create the culture. So Shingo has been an inspiration, as well as the Shingo awarded research, and of course some other lean Bibles that most of you might know. On the other hand, we have our external network that we use to see what are the latest trends. So then we talk, for example, about the Global OPEX Summit that we have each year, but also the other organizations that give us some insights with their newsletters and events. And then I think last but not least, it's the client experiences. So we also sat together internally to discuss those different client experience, sharing them, and then creating a first draft of our model and refining it together with some of the clients. So we discussed the model with clients, we refined it, and after some iterations, we got to the model that we currently have and that I'm going to propose you on the next slide. So if you go to the next slide, then you will see the model, and it exists out of 5 building blocks. So we believe that if you want to achieve enterprise excellence, that it requires excellence in those 5 building blocks. I will quickly go through them, but we will then dive into them one by one. But very high level, you have the first one just on the top, and if you can go back one slide, thank you. There you see that the first block is guiding the business. It's about setting a clear compass for your organization. That as a business, you need to know where you are going to, making sure that every action that happens in your organization is bringing value or bringing you a step closer to realizing your strategy. So it's about defining the strategy and making sure that everybody in the company is following it as well. And then once that strategy is clear, then you should be running your business. And running the business is about being able to delivering your operations in a stable manner, delivering what you promise to your clients. To do so, we believe you need maturity in 2 domains: performance, dialogue, and standards. But Frederik will talk more about that in a second. And then when you are running your business and you're able to do this in a steady basis, delivering what you promise to your clients, then you will notice that sometimes there's a gap between what you want and where you are, or you might even want to raise the bar. And it's at that moment that you say we also need to improve. And improving the business for us means working or having capabilities in terms of improvement management and process management. And then the 2 layers on the bottom are very important layers to us, and because already mentioned, we think culture is the essence, and that's linked to behavior, and the behavior is there done by people and the leadership. So we have 2 solid building blocks as a foundation: people, the capabilities of each employee that we need, and then leadership is about the capabilities to be able to lead, from the first line leader to the CEO of the company. Okay, and then I think we can go a bit deeper into the model itself, viewing the different steps and also having some practical examples. So the first one we will dive into is the guiding the business. When talking about guiding the business, I want to give a very short client story. One of the clients we worked with wanted to install a culture of continuous improvement. And one of the first things that they asked us to do was go to the offices and install those improvement boards just next to the computer desks of the employees. And for those improvement boards, we asked people to give some ideas on how we can improve within the company. And we noticed very, very quick that all those ideas went a bit in all directions. So we asked also, like, which of those ideas do you believe will bring the most value to the company, is going to contribute to the goals of the company, or at least for you as a team? And then you notice that the team wasn't really aware of their goals. They couldn't really tell if at the end of the day they had had a good day or a bad day. Their compass was not really there. And if you don't know where you need to go to, it's also very hard to improve in an efficient manner. So that's why we say guiding the business is crucial. It's a requirement for the other blocks, and we believe there's 3 domains for which you need a solid basis. The first one here mentioned on the slide is customer value. And customer value is about knowing who your customer is and how you would like to service them. Typically, this is translated in a company in a sales department or some specific roles linked to customers, where they are trying to understand who the client is via personas, customer journeys, and sometimes also look into segmentation. For example, right now we're working at Partena Professional, checking, redesigning their or defining their service model for a specific segment of clients, looking at who is this client exactly, what does the client want, and what is then the value that we are going to bring for the client, what does he want to pay for. The second and the third block on the slide are strategy development and business model, and they are more linked to what I would call our strategy department within Möbius, which is not, I would say, the focus of today. We have separate sessions on that, but we do believe that it's important that you do this. And strategy development is about defining why are we existing as a company, what do we want to achieve, how do we position ourselves in the market, and then the business model is more the practical translation, thinking about how are we going to organize ourselves internally, making sure costs and revenues, for example, are in balance. And then I'm going to give the word to Frederik, who's going to explain just a layer, another component within the block of guiding the business.
Thank you, Gert. So when the strategy has been developed, as described by Gert, the next step is to anchor this strategy in all the hierarchical layers of the organization. And this is the process what we call strategy deployment. And within this process, you want to translate your strategy, as mentioned, throughout all different layers of the organization, making sure that every employee is aware of the exact direction you are taking, also mentioned by Gert. So why is this important? First one is it facilitates enterprise alignment, so making sure that all the noses of everyone are in the same direction. A second point is that it also breaks down the strategy in understandable bite-sized chunks, and this way everyone can relate to the strategy. So everyone understands how can I contribute to the bigger picture of the organization. And a last point is that all the initiatives that you set up, all the projects, the KPIs, the improvement IDs, that they tie back to the direction, so to your strategy of the organization. So two tools that we normally use for strategy deployment. First one is already visible on the slide. It's known by everyone, I think, is the Hoshin-Kanri X matrix. And what you do with the Hoshin-Kanri X matrix is where you cascade your 3 to 5 year plan to lower levels of the organization. So first you will translate your 3 to 5 year plan into annual objectives. So this can normally be a roadmap, for example, a 1 year roadmap. Then you will cascade that down into smaller objectives, initiatives, who you will then again cascade down in the organization, which will link to KPIs, but also to the roles, so that everyone again knows I am responsible for certain initiatives linked to the annual roadmap, and then again linked to the 3 to 5 year vision. So all those linking and cascading parts, how do we normally facilitate that? And this is done by something called catchballing. So with catchballing, we want to set up different workshops on all the layers of the organization, where you can see how we can translate the higher level priorities and the goals to lower level objectives. So you can see on the line going downwards, and this is very important for communication. So people are already involved in making the strategy, not only being informed, so also giving feedback, also coming up with their own objectives, their own KPIs. And it's also a platform for negotiating and alignment. I think we can jump to the next slide, and this is also directly the next building block, so running the business. And we have chosen 2 sub-blocks into that category, as mentioned already before, performance dialogue and standards. So the performance dialogue is following up your day-to-day operations, and to have an efficient way of working, you need standards. So first, quickly zooming in on the performance dialogue. If you can maybe continue, Aiko, on the first example. So the most important tool that we use around following up performance are the daily stand-up meetings. So daily stand-up meetings are actually just, as the name suggests, a daily meeting, not taking more than 5 to 10 minutes and consists of 2 major parts. So the first part is the KPI follow-up. So there you will make KPIs. They can be linked, for example, to quality. If you look at production environments, but can also be linked to costs, to people, to environment, for example, in office environments. And of course, what happens if you follow up the KPIs and you have a deviation from the standard, so that means you have a red KPI, then you need to take actions. And this is a second big part of your whole performance dialogue, is the action board. I have also added a picture on the right where you see an action board. And this is actually one of the most important tools, I would say, in performance dialogue, but also when starting up a journey towards excellence. Because with the action board, you create a culture of action drivenness in your organization. And this is also useful when implementing other tools. If you go for implementing projects, for Kaizen events, for improvement boards, at the core, you always have actions that need to be developed and followed up by your team. So it's also directly a very good coaching tool for creating cause-effect relationships with your team, learning them to see the cause and effects relationships, and also having the tools to start with their continuous improvement journey. The second important part in performance dialogue, so the daily stand-up meetings, you will implement them on all different layers of the organization. So from the lower level to the highest level. And all those meetings on the different levels need to be linked, need to be cascaded through the organization. This is what you see on the right. The diagonal line means that the higher you go in the organization, the lower the frequency will be of those meetings. So it could be on site manager level that you don't have a daily meeting, but maybe a weekly meeting. So why is this linkage so important? If there's a problem that the team, for example, on the lower level cannot solve within the team, they should have a standard way of escalating this problem to the higher level. And that's why you have the performance cascade on the one hand, that is shown by the red arrows on the example. But when a problem has been escalated, you also need to receive feedback in a standardized way. And I think most of you will recognize that sometimes people will say, okay, we didn't receive any feedback on what's happening. So that's why the feedback loop is also very important. So actually, to summarize, you standardize the communication around performance follow-up and performance dialogue. If we continue to the next slide, so going to standards. So why are standards important? I have visualized that with a little example on the left side. There you see a graph showing performance over time. And what happens if you don't use standards, from the moment you do any form of improvements, the improvement will not be sustainable. So you see a decline over time, the red line. It's because it has several reasons why you see a decline in improvements. The people will forget the decisions that have been made, and people will leave the company and they will take all the knowledge with them because it has not been written down. And the third one, a lot of people will follow their own way of working. To give you an example, if you have 2 shifts in a call center, you will see that both shifts have different ways of working because they have not uniformed, not aligned their way of working. So what happens if you do work with standards? And this is the graph on the right side. And what will happen is you will lock the improvement in place because you will write down the decisions that have been made around the improvement. But also between 2 improvements, you will also improve your standards. So you will see an increase in performance over time as well. So the benefits are quite large by working with standards. I have on the next slide added 2 examples of standards. So on the left side, you see visual management. I think everybody has heard of visual management. But what you do here is that you don't put the standards on paper. No, you will put the standards very visual. You will put it directly on the workplace. So this can be a production environment or an office environment. And it's quite a good tool, one, to see what is the fixed place of all the parts. But the deviations will also become very, very visible in 1 second. So you will directly see if there are any deviations in the process. Another example of standards, also very well known, is standardized work. So what you will do with standardized work is you will just write down a sequence of activities that need to be done to perform a certain task. This can be done with checklists. This can be done with a manual in office environments, the example you see on the right. It can also be done with a series of pictures, depending on the task, depending on the team, how do they work. So those are two examples of standards. If we continue, we will go on with improving the business, and I will give the word to Yasmin.
Thank you, Frederik. So running the business is one thing indeed, but you also need to constantly improve the business. One part of that is improvement management. This means that you need to manage different types of problems, ideas in different ways. Some of you who know the bubble slides that you can see at the top know that there are different types of ideas. So you have the small incremental improvements, the medium-sized projects on department level, and the big organization-wide transversal projects. All of these will be managed in a different way. So first you have the small bubbles. They are usually individual improvement initiatives and they are employee driven. They can originate from two different sources. So they can originate from the daily management that Frederik explained. So if you have a deviation from the target, that can be a source of improvement ideas. Another way is that it originates from the daily work of employees. So if you have a deviation from the standard or just something that is annoying, that can also give improvement ideas. What is important here is, as I already explained in the beginning, that you have a good system around it so that you have a process for follow-up, for discussion, and also for monitoring these ideas. The medium-sized bubbles then, these are bigger, so they are too big to solve by one person or one action. That is why we need to treat them in a team. And you will usually need some sort of root cause analysis and then a way of PDCA thinking to solve these type of problems. And then the big problems, they can be solved by either Kaizen events or projects. Projects and Kaizen events, they make use of people from different departments, but projects will usually be spread out more over time. And they will also take up budget and resources. Whereas Kaizen events are usually more pressure cooker kind of way of solving problems, where you have a number of consecutive days and then the actions are immediately defined and tested to solve the problem. So that's one part of improving the business. Another part of improving the business is the process management. And managing your processes is a very important part of improving the business because managing your processes across departments is actually essential to organize your organization in a value chain thinking way. You have different types of process management. One popular technique is value stream management, value stream mapping, excuse me, where you visualize, analyze, and improve all the different steps of a product delivery process. But there are other ways. You also have BPMN, for example, or for administrative processes, you have Makigami. And the essence of this will always be to identify waste and define actions to eliminate that waste in your processes. And then I think it's time to start with the foundation of our model, the people and the leadership, and then we go back to Frederik and Gert.
Yes, thank you, Yasmin. So we have now discussed the three top blocks, guiding, running, and improving the business. And we will continue to the two lower foundations of the model, namely people and leadership. And all the tools we have discussed before in guiding, running, and improving are actually merely tools that are actually only facilitating your journey towards excellence. The journey towards excellence is as mentioned before, impossible if you don't have a focus on people and if you don't have the full support of leadership. I think you will all have situations in the past where you could see that if leadership is not supporting the program, you will lose attention and it will collapse. So that is in all our projects that we always focus on people and leadership, in coaching people and in coaching leadership. I will quickly add 2 examples here around personal development and team development. Around personal development, in all the OPEX projects that we do, we always foresee personal coaching as well. So 3 main tools, and I will quickly go over them to show which tools that we use when doing personal coaching. The first is the self-determination theory. It suggests that people are motivated to grow and to change by 3 universal psychological needs, namely competence, autonomy, and relatedness. A second thing we do when we're doing personal coaching is always focusing on the growth versus the fixed mindset. And those 2 tools are quite important in our operational excellence projects because they are evidence-based. The third part, what you see, is the psychological safety. And this is something what we always take into account. Why? To have no guilt culture in the organization, but that people know they are able to make mistakes, able to learn. And this is very important in CI or OPEX journeys. When talking about team development, we have already talked about the autonomy of a team, and this can be done with, for example, the action plan we have mentioned before. And that's why we always have a tool, as you can see here, the competence matrix. So here you will map the skills and the competences of each team member and the total team. And there you will see the strength of certain team members and also the gaps of certain team members. And with this overview, you can see, okay, can we have a team that can support each other? And if not, if there are gaps, how can we build training plans to develop teams and to develop people as well? I think we can continue to the next slide where Gert will talk about leadership.
Thank you, Frederik. Yes, yeah, Frederik already mentioned it, that leadership is crucial in supporting the whole model. And in fact, if you go to one of those OPEX events, then in a lot of cases, the question is asked to the audience, why, if you have an OPEX project running or you had one running and it didn't succeed, how come? And then in a lot of cases, you will see that lack of leadership support is number 1. It's something that a lot of people will recognize. So we believe getting the leadership involved is crucial. At the first line level, so it's at the level of the team leader of a team of 5 people, but also on the level of the direction committee, the CEO and its executive committee. There are a lot of techniques that we can use to create the right capabilities with the leadership. I'm just going to highlight 3 things, but it really depends on the exact situation and where people are in terms of maturity. The first one is linked to our leadership catalog. It's a catalog that's been developed within Möbius, and that's currently used at the Vlaamse overhead, who are using it actually for all team leaders and management within the Vlaamse overhead that want to boost their leadership skills. They can follow a lot of training modules. We have about 16 training models that help them to boost those skills. And then the second and the third point on the slide are more, let's say, instructive tools, I'd say. So leader standard work is about assessing and defining what exactly a leader at each level of your organization should do. So it's really looking at on a daily or a weekly level, what are exactly the activities that we expect from a team leader, a country manager, etc. And then the final one on the slide, some might recognize this, is kata coaching. Kata coaching is you have the pure coaching, I'd say, and then you have more already going into the mentoring phase, where you really take also your experience about certain project or the specific situation involved. And kata coaching is a framework that's pretty operational to help a manager coach its team members on improving the operations on a day-to-day basis. So I think a lot of terms that we gave you today. I'm going to give the word back to Aiko and see if we have any questions.
Right, thank you all for your clear explanation of the business model. Maybe I'll put the model back. If there are any questions, you may ask them in the chat. You may ask them directly if you want. I'll just leave a minute to get your microphone on or formulate the question in the chat. I see a first question running in. I think it's one for Frederick.
Yes.
Second. How can you follow up actions? Wait. How can you follow up actions during a daily stand-up? And how do you prevent a long list of actions?
Yes, actually a good question. So the following up of actions is mainly done via a list of actions. And I think this is maybe the reason why the second question was linked to the first one. So if you have a list, and I think what we always do when having a daily stand-up is we always say, okay, from the moment you have a red KPI, you have to take an action, just to again enforce the action drivenness, to make sure that people know how to take even small actions. You don't have to immediately give the solution, but you can sometimes have an action, for example, like sit together with team member X, Y, or Z to look further at why you have a red KPI. And if you start that up, when the people start to see the benefits of writing down actions, the next part, what will happen is that your list will grow immensely. So to answer the second part of the question, what you can do is you can start to prioritize your actions. And I don't know, Aiko, if you can quickly jump to the slide with the picture of the action plan I have added. I think it is slide 16. Yes. So what you see in the middle is actually an action plan, but it's not a list. And we had the same issue there at the customer, that the list was growing too big. And people said, okay, we cannot see anymore which actions to take. And I think we had around 100 actions. So there we improved the action plan into an action board. And you can see the rows or the names of the different people, and the columns or the days of the week, and also week +1, and a finished column. So what you get here, say for example, this morning on Thursday, you want to go through the actions, you only look at the column of Thursday. And this way you look at the actions of the day. A second improvement is that we also used several colors of action papers. So you see red papers, you see gray papers. And there we say, okay, we divide into 2 priorities. So this is already a better way to canalize the efforts of the actions to discuss during a daily meeting. Because it's impossible to have 100 actions for one department. In production, this is mainly maintenance department, as some of you will recognize. So this is important to keep the focus and to keep the action drivenness on a healthy level. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you very much, Frederick. I think that was a clear answer. Is there anyone else who has a question that they wish to ask Gert, Yasmin, or Frederick?
Maybe also asking if there are things missing for some people. It's always interesting to see if you are missing on some important concepts in this model.
Not immediately, apparently. That means that it will be quite complete. So that's good news. If you have still some questions, but you don't really want to ask them in the big group, or you have a specific question of your own organization, feel free to ask or to contact Frederick, Jasmine, or Gert via LinkedIn or via email and ask your question there. We'll be happy to look at it together with you.
Okay. Thanks
Right.
everyone for your attention.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Bye.